Judge William Harper sat in his chambers on the morning of September 10th, 5 days before the final hearing, staring at the most unusual motion he'd received in his 23 years on the bench. The document before him requested permission to bring a certified police dog into his courtroom during a child custody hearing, not as evidence, not for security purposes, but as emotional support for a traumatized 3-year-old witness. He rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of this decision pressing down on him. His clerk, Margaret, had already warned him that the media was circling this case like sharks. "Judge brings dog to court" would be the headline. He could already see it. His colleagues would question his judgment. The appeals court might overturn whatever ruling he made based on procedural irregularities. But then he thought about Emma Carter's hollow eyes in the photographs he'd reviewed. He thought about the child psychologist's desperate plea. And he thought about his own granddaughter, Sophie, who was also 3 years old and could talk for hours about her favorite cartoons, her imaginary friend, and why the sky was blue. What would it take to silence a child so completely? Judge Harper picked up his phone and called Dr. Rachel Kim directly. "Tell me why this will work when everything else has failed." Dr. Rachel Kim had been prepared for this call. She'd spent the previous night rehearsing her arguments, knowing that Judge Harper's decision could make or break Emma's chance at justice and healing. She sat in her office at the Children's Trauma Center, surrounded by case files and research papers, and took a deep breath before responding. "Your Honor, I've been working with traumatized children for 15 years, Dr. Kim began, her voice steady despite her nervousness. "Emma Carter is experiencing what we call selective mutism triggered by severe trauma. It's not that she can't speak. It's that her brain has essentially shut down her ability to communicate verbally as a protective mechanism. Every traditional therapy has failed because they all require Emma to trust another human being, and right now, she doesn't trust any adult. We've broken that trust too many times." Judge Harper listened intently as Dr. Kim continued. "But therapy dogs, particularly highly trained ones like Officer Max, bypass that trust barrier. Dogs don't lie. They don't have agendas. They don't take sides in custody battles. To a traumatized child, a dog represents pure, unconditional safety. I've researched 23 cases across the country where therapy dogs help nonverbal trauma victims communicate. The success rate is remarkable, 74%. "And the other 26%? Judge Harper asked. "They still didn't speak," Dr. Kim admitted. "But they showed significant reduction in anxiety and distress. So even if Emma doesn't testify, having Officer Max present will reduce her trauma from the experience. Right now, Your Honor, we're asking a 3-year-old to face her worst fears in a room full of intimidating adults, including the father she may have witnessed committing a violent crime. That's psychological torture." Judge Harper was silent for a long moment. "Tell me about this dog. Tell me about Officer Max." Dr. Kim smiled for the first time in days. "Officer Max is a 5-year-old German Shepherd who's been working with the K-9 unit for 4 years. But he's not just a patrol dog. He's cross-trained in victim assistance and trauma support. His handler, Officer James Chen, spent 2 years getting him certified through 3 different therapy dog programs. Max has been present for 23 child witness testimonies in other jurisdictions, and in 17 of those cases, the children were able to testify when they previously couldn't." She pulled up a file on her computer. "There's a case in Oregon last year, a 5-year-old girl who witnessed her mother's murder. She hadn't spoken in 8 months. When they brought Max into the interview room, she started talking within minutes." Or the case in Texas, a 7-year-old boy who was so terrified of his abuser that he'd have panic attacks every time adults asked him questions. With Max lying next to him, he was able to describe what happened. "The dog didn't magically cure their trauma, Your Honor, but he gave them enough of a sense of safety to find their voices." Judge Harper made his decision. "I'll allow it. But Dr. Kim, if this backfires, if that dog causes any disruption, if Emma becomes more distressed, if this turns into a circus, I'll clear that courtroom immediately. Understood. Understood, Your Honor, thank you. The news of Judge Harper's decision spread quickly. David Carter's lead attorney, Richard Blackwood, was furious. He immediately filed an objection, calling the decision unprecedented and prejudicial. During an emergency hearing 2 days before the trial, Blackwood stood before Judge Harper, his face red with indignation. Your Honor, this is absurd, Blackwood argued, his voice rising. We're turning a serious legal proceeding into a petting zoo. How is my client supposed to receive a fair hearing when the judge is allowing therapy animals into the courtroom? What's next? Comfort ponies, emotional support peacocks. This sets a dangerous precedent. Jennifer Carter's attorney, Monica Reeves, fired back immediately. What's absurd is forcing a traumatized 3-year-old to testify in a hostile environment without any support. Mr. Blackwood is more concerned about his client's convenience than a child's well-being. The defense's real fear is that Emma will finally be able to tell the truth about what her father did. Alleged, Blackwood shouted. Allegedly did. There's been no proof, no charges, no. Enough, Judge Harper's gavel cracked like thunder. The courtroom fell silent. Mr. Blackwood, your objection is noted and overruled. Ms. Reeves, control your accusations. This court is interested in one thing only, the truth. And if a trained therapy dog can help us reach that truth, then that's what we're going to do. The dog will be present under strict protocols. Officer Chen will maintain complete control at all times. The dog will not approach any witness unless specifically directed by this court. Are we clear? Both attorneys nodded, though Blackwood looked like he'd swallowed something bitter. Meanwhile, at the K-9 training facility across town, Officer James Chen was preparing Officer Max for the most important assignment of their partnership. Chen had been Max's handler since the dog graduated from the police academy 4 years ago. They'd worked hundreds of cases together: drug busts, suspect apprehensions, search and rescue operations. But the victim assistance cases were always the ones that affected Chen the most deeply. This one's different, buddy, Chen said to Max as he brushed the German Shepherd's coat until it gleamed. This little girl needs us. She's been silent for 6 months. 6 months, Max. Can you imagine being that scared, that traumatized, that unable to ask for help? Max tilted his head, his intelligent brown eyes focused on Chen's face, as if he understood every word. In a way, he probably did. Max had an uncanny ability to sense human emotions, to know when someone needed comfort versus space, when to approach versus when to wait. Chen had been reviewing Emma's case file obsessively for the past week. He'd watched video recordings of her failed therapy sessions, seen the way she flinched when adults moved too quickly, noticed how she clutched that pink bunny like it was the only safe thing in her world. He'd consulted with Dr. Kim multiple times about the best approach. The key is to let her make the first move, Dr. Kim had instructed. Max needs to be present but passive, non-threatening, just a calm, steady presence in the room. If Emma wants to interact with him, she needs to initiate it. Otherwise, we could make things worse. Chen understood. He trained Max for exactly this kind of scenario. The dog knew how to read a room, how to remain perfectly still for hours if necessary, how to offer comfort without being intrusive. But Chen also knew this case was high stakes. If it worked, they could help a traumatized child and potentially solve a serious crime. If it failed, Judge Harper might never allow therapy dogs in his courtroom again, closing off this option for future victims. The night before the hearing, Chen couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Emma, about her silence, about the terrible things she'd witnessed. He thought about his own daughter, Maya, who was 6 years old and talked his ear off every chance she got. He couldn't imagine Maya going silent, couldn't imagine what kind of horror would cause that. At 2 a.m., he got out of bed and went to check on Max, who was sleeping in his kennel. The German Shepherd woke immediately, alert and ready. Tomorrow we help that little girl, Chen whispered. Whatever it takes, we give her a safe space to find her voice. You ready for this? Max's tail wagged once, softly, as if he understood the gravity of what was coming. September 15th arrived with unseasonably cold weather, dark clouds gathering over the courthouse, as if the sky itself sensed the importance of what was about to unfold. Inside Courtroom 3B, the atmosphere was electric with tension. David Carter sat rigid at the defense table, his jaw clenched, his expensive suit unable to hide the anxiety in his eyes. Jennifer Carter was already crying quietly at the prosecution table, tissue clutched in her trembling hands. Detective Maria Santos sat in the gallery, having taken personal time off to be present for Emma. The media had been barred from the courtroom, but journalists crowded the hallway outside, waiting for any news. And in the witness preparation room, Emma Carter sat with Mrs. Patterson, staring at the wall, silent as always, unaware that her entire future, and perhaps her voice, was about to change with the arrival of one specially trained dog. The bailiff checked his watch. 9:00 a.m. Time to begin. Emma Carter remembered everything. That was the curse she carried in her small 3-year-old mind, the crystal-clear memory of that Valentine's Day night, replaying over and over like a nightmare she couldn't escape even when she was awake. She remembered being tucked into bed by her mommy at 7:30 p.m., the same time as always. Her mother had read her favorite book, Goodnight Moon, and kissed her forehead 3 times, one for I, one for love, and one for you. Emma had fallen asleep feeling safe, clutching her pink bunny, Mr. Hopper's, dreaming about the Valentine's cookies they'd made that afternoon with the red sprinkles. She remembered waking up later, much later, to the sound of shouting. At first she thought she was dreaming, but the voices were too loud, too angry, too real. Her daddy's voice, the one that sometimes got scary loud, was yelling words Emma didn't understand but knew were bad words. Then Marcus's voice, trying to sound calm but with something else underneath, fear maybe. Emma had slipped out of bed, Mr. Hopper's clutched tight against her chest. Her mother always said to stay in bed when grown-ups were talking, but something in her daddy's voice made her scared for her mommy. She'd crept down the hallway in her princess pajamas, her bare feet making no sound on the carpet. The living room was where it happened, the place where everything changed forever. Emma had peeked around the corner, and what she saw was burned into her memory like a brand. Her daddy stood in the middle of the living room, his face red and twisted with anger, veins bulging in his neck. Marcus was backing away, his hands up, saying something like, "David, man, calm down, let's talk about this." But Daddy didn't want to talk. Daddy grabbed the wine bottle from the coffee table, the pretty green one Mommy liked, and Emma watched as her father swung it at Marcus's head. The sound it made, that horrible cracking, thudding sound, echoed in Emma's nightmares every single night since. Marcus dropped like one of Emma's toy dolls when she let them fall from her hands, but heavier, with that same terrible sound when he hit the floor. Emma had frozen behind the wall, her whole body shaking, her hand pressed over her mouth to keep the scream inside. Mr. Hoppers had fallen from her arms, landing on the floor with a soft thump that somehow seemed loud in that terrible moment. Blood was spreading on the carpet, so much blood, more red than the Valentine sprinkles. Marcus wasn't moving. His eyes were open but looked wrong, empty, like the lights were on but nobody was home, just like Grandma used to say. That's when Daddy had seen her. His head had snapped around and his eyes, Emma would never forget his eyes in that moment. They were wild, desperate, scary in a way that made Emma's whole body go cold. "Emma," he'd said, his voice suddenly different, trying to sound normal but shaking. "Baby girl, go back to bed. This is just a grown-up problem. Go back to bed right now." But Emma couldn't move. She stood there, staring at Marcus's still body, at the blood, at her daddy's hands that were also covered in red. That's when Mommy had come running from the bedroom, screaming. Emma remembered her mother's face going white, remembered her dropping to her knees next to Marcus, saying his name over and over. "Marcus! Marcus, can you hear me? Oh God, what did you do?" Daddy had grabbed Mommy's arm, pulling her away. "He attacked me, Jen. I was defending myself. You saw it, right? You saw him come at me." But Mommy hadn't seen it. Emma knew Mommy hadn't seen it because Mommy had been in the bedroom. Emma was the only one who saw. Emma saw everything. What happened next was blurry in Emma's memory, like someone had smudged a painting before it dried. She remembered Daddy dragging Marcus toward the back door. She remembered Mommy screaming and trying to call 911, but Daddy had grabbed her phone and thrown it against the wall where it broke into pieces. She remembered hiding behind the couch when Daddy came back inside, his shirt now different, the bloody one gone. She remembered Daddy kneeling down in front of where she was hiding, his face very close to hers, and saying words that would haunt her. "Emma, baby, this is very important. You didn't see anything tonight. Nothing happened. Marcus was never here. If you tell anyone Marcus was here, something bad will happen to Mommy. Do you understand? Something very, very bad. You have to be Daddy's brave girl and never, ever talk about tonight. Can you promise, Daddy?" Emma had nodded, too terrified to do anything else. And somehow she'd known that Daddy meant it. Something bad would happen if she talked, something worse than what already happened. So she'd made herself small and quiet, and tried to disappear into herself where the scary things couldn't reach her. The police had come eventually. Emma didn't know how much later. She'd still been hiding behind the couch when the officers arrived. She'd heard Mommy crying, heard Daddy's voice all smooth and calm now, explaining that it was just a domestic argument, that Jennifer's boyfriend had stormed out hours ago, that everything was fine. But everything wasn't fine. Emma had seen the blood on the carpet, even though Daddy had tried to clean it up. She'd seen the broken wine bottle in the trash. She'd seen Marcus's shoe left behind near the door, the one that must have fallen off when Daddy was dragging him. A nice police lady had found Emma behind the couch and carried her out. Emma had wanted to tell her everything, wanted to point to the bloodstain, wanted to say Daddy hurt Marcus, but the words wouldn't come. Every time she tried to speak, she heard Daddy's voice in her head. "Something bad will happen to Mommy." So Emma had stayed quiet, and the longer she stayed quiet, the harder it became to speak at all. The words got stuck somewhere deep inside her, locked behind a door made of fear and trauma, and the terrible responsibility of keeping a secret too big for a 3-year-old to carry. In the months that followed, Emma learned to live in silence. The therapists with their kind faces and gentle questions, she couldn't answer them. Detective Santos with her warm smile and promises of safety, Emma wanted to trust her but couldn't risk it. The judges and lawyers and all the grown-ups who kept asking her questions, they didn't understand that talking meant danger, meant something bad happening to Mommy. Emma had nightmares every night. Sometimes she dreamed she was back behind that couch, watching Marcus fall over and over again. Sometimes she dreamed that Daddy found out she told and came after Mommy with another wine bottle. Sometimes she dreamed that everyone was mad at her for not helping Marcus, for hiding instead of calling for help. Mrs. Patterson, her foster mother, was nice and patient. She never forced Emma to talk, just sat with her and read stories and made sure she had Mr. Hoppers at bedtime. But even Mrs. Patterson couldn't reach the place where Emma's voice was locked away. What nobody understood was that Emma wanted to talk. She wanted to tell someone what happened. She wanted Marcus to be found and helped. She wanted her Mommy to be safe and her Daddy to stop being scary. But wanting something and being able to do it were two different things, especially when you were 3 years old and the weight of a terrible secret was crushing you. Sometimes Emma would open her mouth to speak, and she'd feel her throat close up, like invisible hands were squeezing it shut. Her heart would race, her hands would shake, and the words would dissolve before they could form. Her body had learned that speaking meant danger, and no matter how much her mind wanted to talk, her body wouldn't let her. She developed ways to communicate without words, nodding, shaking her head, pointing, drawing pictures that never quite showed what she really wanted to say. The psychologist said it was selective mutism, a trauma response. They said with time and therapy she might speak again. But they didn't know what she knew. They didn't know about Daddy's threat. They didn't know that somewhere out there Marcus might still be hurt, might still need help. They didn't know that every day Emma stayed silent, she felt like she was letting Marcus down. Now, 6 months later, sitting in the courthouse waiting room while grown-ups argued about her future, Emma felt the weight of that Valentine's Day night pressing down on her like a heavy blanket she couldn't throw off. She clutched Mr. Hoppers and stared at nothing, trapped in a silence that felt more like drowning every day. Part of her hoped the grown-ups would just give up and stop asking questions. But another part of her, a small, brave part that was getting harder and harder to hear, hoped that somehow, some way, someone would help her find her voice again. She just didn't know that help would come with 4 legs and a gentle brown-eyed gaze that promised safety without demanding words. The courthouse corridor buzzed with nervous energy at 9:15 a.m. when Officer James Chen arrived with Max. The German Shepherd walked with perfect discipline beside his handler, his black and tan coat gleaming under the fluorescent lights, his ears alert but relaxed. To anyone watching, Max looked like any other police dog, professional, focused, ready for duty. But Chen knew better. He could feel the slight tension in the leash, the way Max's nostrils flared as he processed the hundreds of scents in the busy courthouse, the subtle shift in his gait that indicated heightened awareness. "Easy, buddy," Chen murmured, his voice low and calm. "Just another day at work." But it wasn't just another day, and both of them knew it. Detective Maria Santos was waiting for them outside Courtroom 3B. She'd been packing for the past 20 minutes, her anxiety obvious in the way she kept checking her watch and glancing toward the witness room where Emma waited. When she saw Chen and Max approaching, relief flooded her face. "Thank God you're here," Maria said, kneeling down to Max's level. The dog regarded her with those intelligent brown eyes, his tail giving a single controlled wag. "Hey there, Max. You're here to help our girl, right? She really needs you today." Max's ears perked forward as if he understood every word. In Chen's experience, he probably did. The dog had an uncanny ability to sense when a case was important, when someone needed him most. Chen had seen it dozens of times, the way Max would become even more focused, more attuned, more deliberate in his movements when the stakes were high. "How's Emma doing?" Chen asked, standing straight again. Maria's expression darkened. "Same as always, silent, scared. Mrs. Patterson says she didn't sleep last night. She just sat up in bed, holding that stuffed bunny, staring at the wall. That poor baby knows something big is happening today, and she's terrified." Chen felt his chest tighten. He'd reviewed so many details about Emma's case that he felt like he knew her, even though they'd never met. He knew about her love for strawberry ice cream, about how she used to sing "Twinkle, Twinkle Little Star" before she went silent, about the pink bunny named Mr. Hoppers that never left her side. He knew about the nightmares and the way she flinched when men raised their voices. He knew that underneath that traumatized silence was a little girl who desperately wanted to speak, but couldn't find her way out of the fear. "Max will do his best," Chen said quietly. "That's all we can promise." The bailiff, a stern-looking man named Harold who'd worked the courthouse for 30 years, appeared in the doorway. His expression was skeptical as he looked at Max. "Judge Harper wants to see the dog before we begin. He wants to make sure," Harold paused, searching for diplomatic words, "that this arrangement will work." Chen nodded. He'd expected this. Judge Harper had made a controversial decision allowing Max in the courtroom, and the judge would want to ensure everything was under control before proceeding. "Of course, lead the way." They entered through the side door into Judge Harper's chambers. The judge sat behind his massive oak desk, looking older and more tired than his 62 years. His gray hair seemed to have more white in it than the last time Chen had seen him at a community event. The weight of this case was clearly taking its toll. "Officer Chen," Judge Harper said, rising from his chair, "and this must be Officer Max." "Yes, Your Honor." Chen brought Max to a sitting position. The dog sat perfectly still, his posture alert but not aggressive, his eyes focused on the judge with calm attention. Judge Harper walked around his desk and approached slowly. Chen noted with approval that the judge moved deliberately, not making any sudden gestures that might startle a nervous dog, though Max was anything but nervous. The German Shepherd remained motionless, allowing the judge to examine him. "He's very well behaved," Judge Harper observed, extending his hand for Max to sniff. The dog's nose twitched as he gathered information, then his tail wagged once, Max's sign of approval. "He's been trained for this type of work specifically, Your Honor," Chen explained. "Max understands courtroom protocol. He won't bark, won't move without command, won't approach anyone unless directed. He's been present for 23 child witness testimonies in 6 different states. His presence has a 91% success rate in reducing anxiety markers in traumatized children." Judge Harper returned to his chair, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. "Officer Chen, I need you to understand something. I'm taking a significant professional risk allowing this. The appellate court could overturn any ruling I make today based on procedural irregularities. Defense attorneys are already preparing appeals. Legal scholars will debate this decision for years, but none of that matters if we can help that little girl." "I understand, Your Honor. If at any point Max causes a disruption, if he shows any signs of aggression, if his presence makes things worse instead of better, I will remove him immediately. Are we clear?" "Absolutely clear, Your Honor. Max's sole purpose is to provide comfort. If he can't do that, we'll leave without question." Judge Harper studied both Chen and Max for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Very well. Let's see if we can give Emma Carter her voice back. Bailiff, we're ready to begin." The transition from the quiet chambers to the crowded courtroom was like entering a different world. The gallery was packed with people, social workers, case investigators, expert witnesses, and Emma's extended family members on both sides. The tension was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Conversations died immediately as Chen led Max through the door. Every eye in the room turned to watch the German Shepherd's entrance. David Carter's reaction was immediate and visceral. He half stood from his chair, his face draining of color, his hands gripping the table so hard his knuckles turned white. His attorney, Richard Blackwood, put a restraining hand on his shoulder and whispered something urgent in his ear. David sat back down, but his eyes never left Max, and Chen noticed the man's leg bouncing nervously beneath the table. Interesting reaction, Chen thought. Most people were curious or confused when they saw a police dog in a courtroom, but afraid. That was unusual. Jennifer Carter's response was different. She pressed both hands to her mouth, tears already streaming down her face, hope and desperation warring in her expression. She whispered to her attorney, "Will this really work? Can he really help her?" Monica Reeves squeezed her client's hand reassuringly but said nothing. Nobody knew if this would work. Detective Maria Santos had taken a seat in the front row of the gallery, and when Max passed her, she gave Chen an encouraging nod. She'd been Emma's most consistent advocate throughout this nightmare, and Chen could see the prayer in her eyes. Please let this work. Please give Emma her voice back. Chen led Max to a position near the witness stand, about 6 feet away, close enough to be present but not so close as to be intrusive. He gave Max the command to lie down, and the dog complied immediately, settling into a sphinx-like position with his head up and alert. Max's brown eyes scanned the courtroom with professional detachment, taking in every person, every movement, every scent. The court reporter, a woman named Susan who'd been doing this job for 15 years, couldn't help but stare. She'd seen a lot of unusual things in courtrooms, emotional outbursts, bizarre evidence, even a goat once in a property dispute, but never a police dog positioned as emotional support. She adjusted her equipment and prepared to record whatever happened next. Judge Harper took his seat at the bench, his gavel in hand. This court is now in session. Before we begin with today's proceedings, I want to address the presence of Officer Max in this courtroom. This dog is here for one purpose only: to provide emotional support to a traumatized child witness. He is not evidence. He is not entertainment. He is a certified therapy animal who has helped numerous children testify in difficult circumstances. Anyone who treats his presence with anything less than professional respect will be removed from this courtroom. Am I understood? A murmur of agreement rippled through the gallery. Furthermore, Judge Harper continued, his voice stern, I expect absolute decorum during these proceedings. We are dealing with a 3-year-old child who has experienced severe trauma. This court will be a safe space for her, or we will clear this room and proceed with closed doors. Defense counsel, you had objections. They are noted and overruled. Are you prepared to proceed? Richard Blackwood stood, his jaw tight. The defense maintains its objection to this irregular proceeding, Your Honor, but we are prepared to continue. Prosecution. Monica Reeves rose. The prosecution is ready, Your Honor. Judge Harper nodded. Very well, bailiff, please bring in Emma Carter. The courtroom fell into absolute silence. Chen felt Max tense slightly beside him, the dog's instincts picking up on the collective anxiety in the room. Chen placed his hand on Max's head, a gentle reminder, stay calm, stay focused. We're here to help. The side door opened, and Mrs. Patterson entered, holding Emma's hand. The little girl looked impossibly small and fragile, her blonde hair hanging limp around her pale face, her other arm clutching Mr. Hopper's the pink bunny against her chest. She wore a simple blue dress that Mrs. Patterson had chosen because Emma had seemed to respond positively to it that morning, or as positively as Emma responded to anything anymore. Emma's eyes were downcast, focused on the floor, her feet taking reluctant steps as Mrs. Patterson gently guided her forward. The child was physically present but emotionally 1,000 miles away, retreating into that safe space inside herself where the scary world couldn't reach her. Chen watched carefully as Emma was led toward the witness stand. Her path would take her within 10 feet of where Max lay. This was the critical moment, the first time Emma would see the dog. Would she react with fear, curiosity, or would she retreat even further into her shell? As Emma passed by Max's position, something remarkable happened. The little girl's steps faltered. Her downcast eyes lifted slightly, and she saw the German shepherd lying there, calm and steady and somehow radiating safety. Max, for his part, remained perfectly still, but his ears rotated toward Emma, tracking her movement, and his eyes, those warm, intelligent brown eyes, locked onto hers with gentle attention. For just a moment, the briefest flicker of time, something changed in Emma's expression. It wasn't quite hope, it wasn't quite curiosity, but it was something, a tiny crack in the wall of silence and fear that had imprisoned her for 6 months. Then the moment passed, and Emma continued toward the witness stand, her face returning to its blank mask. But Chen had seen it, Max had seen it, and somewhere in that traumatized little girl's mind, a connection had been made. The witness stand loomed before Emma like a mountain she couldn't climb. Mrs. Patterson helped her up the 2 steps, and even with cushions placed on the chair to boost her height, Emma still felt swallowed by the enormous wooden structure. From up here, the courtroom looked huge and terrifying, a sea of adult faces all staring at her, waiting, expecting something she couldn't give them. Her fingers dug into Mr. Hopper's so tightly that the bunny's fabric stretched. Emma's heart hammered in her chest so hard she could hear it in her ears, a rapid thump-thump-thump that made her feel dizzy. Her throat felt closed, like someone had their hands wrapped around it, squeezing. The familiar panic was rising, the same panic that came every time someone asked her to talk about that night. Judge Harper's voice was soft and kind when he spoke, so different from how he'd sounded before. "Hello, Emma. My name is Judge Harper. Do you know why you're here today?" Emma stared at her lap. Mr. Hopper's black button eyes stared back at her. She could feel everyone looking at her, could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on her small shoulders. She wanted to disappear, wanted to close her eyes and be anywhere but here. "Emma," Judge Harper continued gently, "you're not in any trouble. Nobody here is angry with you. We just want to ask you some questions about what happened on Valentine's Day. Can you look at me, sweetheart?" Emma's hand started shaking. Valentine's Day. The words sent ice through her veins. She saw flashes in her mind, the wine bottle, the blood, Marcus falling, Daddy's wild eyes, the threat about Mommy. Her breathing got faster, shorter, like she couldn't get enough air. "Your Honor, perhaps we should start with simple questions," Monica Reeves suggested, standing and approaching the witness stand with careful steps. She'd worked with traumatized children before and knew how to project calm and safety. "Emma, my name is Ms. Reeves. I'm a lawyer, which means I help people. I'm here to help you today. Can you nod if you understand me?" Emma didn't move. Her eyes remained fixed on Mr. Hopper's, as if the stuffed bunny could protect her from what was coming. Her whole body had gone rigid, every muscle locked in place. Monica tried again. "Emma, do you remember the night when your daddy came to your mommy's apartment? The night when Marcus was there?" The shaking got worse. Emma's little body trembled like a leaf in a storm. A small whimpering sound escaped her throat, not words, just a sound of pure distress. Mrs. Patterson, standing nearby, took a concerned step forward, but Judge Harper gestured for her to wait. "Perhaps a different approach," Richard Blackwood said, standing at the defense table. His voice was more businesslike, less gentle. "Your Honor, this child is clearly unable to testify. She's nonverbal, traumatized, and quite frankly, this is becoming cruel. I move that we dismiss her as a witness and proceed without her testimony." "Denied," Judge Harper said firmly. "Ms. Reeves, continue but carefully." Monica knelt down beside the witness stand, bringing herself to Emma's eye level. "Emma, honey, I know this is scary. I know talking about that night is the hardest thing anyone has ever asked you to do. But sweetheart, we need your help. Marcus needs your help. Your mommy needs your help. Can you try to tell us what you saw?" Emma's breathing became ragged, almost hyperventilating. Tears started streaming down her cheeks, silent tears that fell onto Mr. Hopper's worn pink fur. Her mouth opened slightly, as if she was trying to speak, but no sound came out except a choked, strangled gasp. In the gallery, Jennifer Carter broke down completely. "Please don't make her do this," she sobbed. "Look at her, she can't, my baby can't." "Mrs. Carter, you need to remain quiet or you'll be removed," Judge Harper warned, though his own expression was deeply troubled. He was watching Emma's distress with growing concern, second-guessing his decision to put her through this. David Carter, meanwhile, sat perfectly still at the defense table, his face unreadable. But his eyes were locked on Emma with an intensity that bordered on threatening. He wasn't blinking, wasn't moving, just staring at his daughter as if willing her to remain silent. Detective Maria Santos noticed David's stare and felt a chill run down her spine. There was something predatory about it, something that screamed intimidation even without words. She made a mental note to include this observation in her report. "Emma," Monica tried one more time, her voice breaking slightly with emotion. "Can you tell us what happened to Marcus? Where did he go after your daddy?" "Objection," Richard Blackwood shot to his feet. "Counsel is leading the witness and making assumptions not in evidence." "Sustained," Judge Harper said wearily. "Ms. Reeves, rephrase." But Monica didn't get a chance to rephrase because Emma's distress had reached a critical point. The little girl's tears had turned into silent, body-racking sobs. Her shoulders shook violently, and the whimpering sound grew louder, more desperate, a wounded animal sound that made everyone in the courtroom deeply uncomfortable. "Your Honor," Mrs. Patterson interjected, unable to stay silent any longer. "This isn't working. She's going into a full panic attack. We need to stop." Dr. Rachel Kim, who'd been sitting in the gallery as an expert witness, stood up quickly. "Your Honor, may I approach? I have experience with this type of trauma response." Judge Harper nodded, his own face pale. This was going even worse than he'd feared. "Approach." Dr. Kim moved swiftly to the witness stand and knelt beside Emma, not touching her but speaking in a low, soothing voice. "Emma, you're safe. You're safe right here, right now. Nobody is going to hurt you. Can you take a deep breath with me? In through your nose, out through your mouth." Emma couldn't. Her breathing was too fast, too shallow. She was gasping for air between sobs, her little chest heaving, her face turning red. The panic had completely overtaken her rational mind. She was drowning in fear and trauma, right there in front of everyone. "This is unconscionable," Jennifer Carter shouted, standing despite her attorney trying to pull her back down. "You're torturing her. Stop this right now." "Mrs. Carter, sit down." Judge Harper's gavel cracked like lightning, but his voice was torn. He could see Emma's distress, could see that they were causing more harm than good. But without her testimony, how could he determine the truth? How could he protect her if he didn't know what happened? The courtroom erupted into chaos. Jennifer was crying and shouting. David remained eerily silent, still staring at Emma. The bailiff was trying to restore order. Attorneys were arguing. And in the middle of it all, Emma Carter was falling apart, fragmenting into pieces right before their eyes. Dr. Kim looked desperately around the room, searching for something, anything that might help. Her eyes landed on Officer Max, still lying calmly in his position near the witness stand, the only creature in the entire courtroom who seemed unaffected by the chaos swirling around him. "Officer Chen," Dr. Kim called out over the noise. "Can Max approach?" Chen looked to Judge Harper, who was barely maintaining control of his courtroom. The judge gave a short, sharp nod. "Do it. Anything to help her." But Chen hesitated. This wasn't the way it was supposed to happen. Max was supposed to wait for Emma to initiate contact, to make the first move when she felt ready. Having the dog approach while she was in full panic mode could backfire spectacularly. She might become more frightened, might associate Max with this terrible moment instead of with safety. Yet looking at Emma's breakdown, Chen realized they were out of options. If they didn't do something immediately, this child was going to have a complete psychological collapse. "Max," Chen commanded quietly, using the hand signal that meant comfort approach. "Slow, gentle." The German shepherd rose from his position with fluid grace. But he didn't move toward Emma immediately. Instead, he did something that showed his incredible training and instinct. He approached the witness stand from an angle where Emma could see him coming, where he wouldn't startle her, moving so slowly and deliberately that even in her panicked state, she'd have time to process his presence. Emma's sobbing continued, but her eyes, those tear-filled, terrified eyes, tracked Max's movement. The dog took 3 steps, then paused. 3 more steps, then paused again. He was giving her time to adjust, time to accept his approach, time to decide if she wanted him close or not. The courtroom's chaos began to quiet as everyone noticed what was happening. Even Jennifer Carter's sobs softened as she watched the German shepherd's careful approach. There was something mesmerizing about it, something that commanded attention. This powerful animal moving with such gentleness, such obvious intention to comfort rather than threaten. Max took another 3 steps, and now he was at the base of the witness stand, looking up at Emma with those warm brown eyes. He didn't jump up, didn't bark, didn't try to force interaction. He simply sat, patient and calm, and waited. Emma's breathing was still ragged, but the violent sobbing had subsided into quieter crying. Her eyes were locked on Max now, studying him through her tears. Mr. Hopper's was still clutched against her chest, but one small hand had loosened its death grip slightly. The entire courtroom held its collective breath. This was the moment, the point where Emma would either retreat further into her traumatized silence or find some small measure of courage to reach out. Dr. Kim remained kneeling beside the witness stand, not speaking, not moving, just being present. Monica Reeves had backed away, giving Emma space. Judge Harper sat motionless at the bench, his gavel forgotten. Even the court reporter had stopped typing, her hands hovering over the keys, waiting. And Emma Carter, 3 years old and carrying the weight of a secret that had nearly destroyed her, stared at the dog who had somehow walked through all the chaos and fear to offer her something she hadn't felt in 6 months: the possibility of safety. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. She tried again, her face scrunching with effort, with the monumental struggle to push words past the trauma that had locked them away. The silence in Courtroom 3B was absolute, crystalline, fragile as glass. Everyone present understood they were witnessing something profound, something that would determine not just the outcome of a custody case, but the fate of a little girl's broken voice. Emma's mouth opened one more time. Her eyes never left Max's gentle, patient gaze. And finally, two small words emerged, so quiet they were barely audible but clear enough to shatter the silence that had held her captive for half a year. "Come here." The two words were barely louder than a whisper, fragile as spider silk, but they rang through Courtroom 3B like a bell. Emma's voice, her actual voice, speaking actual words after 6 months of silence, cracked slightly on the second word, but the meaning was unmistakable. She wasn't speaking to Judge Harper or the lawyers or her mother or the psychologist. She was speaking to Max. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. The courtroom seemed frozen in time, everyone processing what they'd just heard. Had she really spoken? Had those words actually come from the silent child who hadn't uttered a complete sentence since Valentine's Day? Officer James Chen felt his throat tighten with emotion. In 4 years of working with Max on victim assistance cases, he'd witnessed many breakthroughs, but something about this moment felt different, more profound, more desperate, more necessary. He looked down at Max, who remained sitting at the base of the witness stand, his brown eyes still locked on Emma's face. The dog's tail gave one small wag, as if acknowledging her request. Chen looked to Judge Harper, who sat motionless at the bench, his eyes wide with shock and something that looked like hope. The judge gave a single, sharp nod. Permission granted. "Max," Chen said softly, using the command he'd trained specifically for this type of situation. "Go to her, gentle." The German shepherd rose with careful precision and climbed the 2 steps up to the witness stand platform. His movements were slow, deliberate, giving Emma every opportunity to change her mind, to pull back, to retreat into her silence again. But she didn't. Instead, her small hand reached out, trembling violently, extending toward Max like a drowning person reaching for a life raft. When Max reached her, he did something beautiful and instinctive. Rather than standing at his full height, which would have been intimidating to such a small child, he lowered himself slightly and moved his head forward, pressing his snout gently against Emma's outstretched palm. The contact was soft, warm, solid, real in a way that seemed to anchor Emma back to the present moment, pulling her out of the nightmare that had held her captive for so long. Emma's fingers buried themselves in Max's fur, clutching desperately at his collar, his neck, his shoulders, anywhere she could hold on. Then, in a moment that would be remembered by everyone present for the rest of their lives, the little girl slid off the cushioned chair and wrapped her entire body around the dog, burying her face in his thick coat. And she wept. Not the silent, terrified tears from moments before, but deep, guttural sobs that seemed to come from the very core of her being. 6 months of trapped fear and trauma and terrible secrets pouring out all at once. Her small body shook with the force of it, and Max stood perfectly still, a furry pillar of steadiness and safety, letting her hold on as tightly as she needed to. Officer Chen's eyes burned with tears he couldn't quite hide. He glanced around the courtroom and saw he wasn't alone. The court reporter, Susan, had abandoned all pretense of professional detachment and was wiping her eyes with a tissue. Detective Maria Santos had both hands pressed over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Even the bailiff, Harold, who'd seen everything in his 30 years on the job, was blinking rapidly and looking away. Jennifer Carter had collapsed back into her chair, sobbing into her hands, her whole body shaking. "She spoke," Jennifer kept repeating through her tears. "My baby spoke, she spoke." Monica Reeves had her hand on her client's shoulder, her own eyes glistening. She'd been practicing law for 18 years, had won dozens of difficult cases, but nothing had ever affected her quite like watching this traumatized child finally find her voice with the help of a dog. David Carter's reaction, however, was starkly different. All the color had drained from his face, leaving him pale as paper. His hands gripped the edge of the defense table so hard that his knuckles had gone white, and his breathing had become rapid and shallow. Richard Blackwood leaned over to whisper something to him, but David didn't seem to hear. His eyes were fixed on Emma with an expression that Detective Santos immediately recognized as fear. Not concern for his daughter, fear of what she might say. Dr. Rachel Kim remained kneeling beside the witness stand, close enough to intervene if needed but giving Emma space. She'd studied trauma responses for 15 years, had written papers on selective mutism, had treated hundreds of traumatized children, but this moment confirmed what she'd always believed. Sometimes healing doesn't come from therapy or medication or traditional interventions. Sometimes it comes from a simple connection with a creature who offers pure, unconditional safety. Judge Harper cleared his throat, his voice thick with emotion when he spoke. "Emma," he said softly, so gently it was almost a whisper. "Emma, sweetheart, can you hear me?" Emma's sobbing had begun to quiet, though she still clung to Max like he was the only solid thing in a world that had become too dangerous to navigate alone. She turned her head slightly, her tear-stained face still pressed against Max's fur, and gave the smallest nod. "Emma, you just spoke," Judge Harper continued, his words carefully chosen. "You said 2 words, that was very brave. Do you think you might be able to say some more words about what happened, about the night that scared you so much?" Emma's body tensed, and for a moment everyone feared she'd retreat back into silence. Her fingers tightened in Max's fur. The dog, sensing her distress, shifted slightly, pressing closer to her, offering more of his solid, comforting presence. Then Emma did something unexpected. Still holding onto Max, still with her face partially hidden in his coat, she began to speak. The words came out muffled, halting, interspersed with hitching breaths and small sobs, but they came. Daddy came to Mommy's house." The courtroom collectively stopped breathing. Richard Blackwood shot to his feet. "Your Honor, I must object." "Sit down, counselor," Judge Harper commanded, his voice suddenly steel. "Sit down right now or I'll have you removed. This child is finally speaking and nothing is going to interrupt her." Blackwood sat, but David Carter looked like he might bolt from his chair. 2 bailiffs subtly moved closer to the defense table, ready to intervene if necessary. Emma continued, her voice small but growing slightly stronger with each word, as if Max's presence was somehow giving her the courage she'd been unable to find alone. "I was supposed to be sleeping, but I heard yelling. I got scared." Mrs. Patterson had moved closer, tears running down her face, silently encouraging Emma to continue. I saw Marcus, and Daddy was so angry, so angry." Emma's voice broke and she squeezed her eyes shut, pressing harder against Max. The German Shepherd remained perfectly still, a living testament to his training and his natural empathy. His eyes, however, shifted to look at Officer Chen as if asking, "Is she okay? Should I stay?" Chen gave an almost imperceptible nod. "Stay, she needs you." "Emma," Dr. Kim said gently, "you're doing so well, you're so brave. Can you tell us what happened next? What did you see?" Emma took a shuddering breath, her small body trembling against Max's solid warmth. When she spoke again, her words came faster, as if now that the dam had broken, everything needed to come out at once. "Daddy grabbed the bottle, the green bottle, and he hit Marcus with it. Marcus fell down and there was blood, so much blood, and Marcus wasn't moving. His eyes were open but he wasn't there. And Daddy saw me watching and he said. Emma's voice dropped to barely audible, and everyone in the courtroom leaned forward, straining to hear. He said if I ever told anyone, something bad would happen to Mommy. He said I had to be quiet forever. He said Marcus was never there. He said I didn't see anything, but I did see. I saw everything. And I was so scared and I wanted to tell someone, but I couldn't because Mommy. I couldn't let something bad happen to Mommy. The last words dissolved into renewed sobbing, but the damage, or rather the truth, was done. Emma had spoken. She had told her terrible secret. She had finally, after 6 months of silence and nightmares and crushing fear, released the burden that had been destroying her from the inside out. The courtroom exploded. "That's a lie," David Carter roared, lunging to his feet. "She's making it up. She's been coached, this is." "Mr. Carter, sit down." Judge Harper's gavel cracked repeatedly, but David was beyond listening. "She's 3 years old. She doesn't know what she saw. Jennifer put these ideas in her head. This is a setup." The bailiffs were already moving. They reached David within seconds, each taking an arm. He struggled against them, still shouting denials, his face purple with rage and panic. "You can't do this. I want my daughter. Emma, tell them the truth. Tell them Daddy didn't do anything." But Emma wasn't listening to her father. She had burrowed even deeper into Max's fur, her small body curled around the dog like he was her shield against the chaos erupting around her. And Max, true to his training and his nature, simply stood there, absorbing her fear and pain and desperation, offering nothing but solid, unwavering presence. "Remove Mr. Carter from this courtroom," Judge Harper ordered. "Bailiffs, take him to a holding cell. We will address his outburst later." As David was dragged from the courtroom, still shouting protests and denials, Jennifer Carter collapsed completely, her sobs echoing through the chaos. Monica Reeves was trying to comfort her client while simultaneously dealing with the procedural nightmare that had just unfolded. Detective Maria Santos was already on her phone, calling the prosecutor's office. Emma's testimony had just given them everything they needed to file charges against David Carter: assault with a deadly weapon, witness tampering, intimidation. Marcus Webb's accident was now officially a crime scene. Through it all, Emma remained clinging to Max, and Max remained steadfast and calm, a four-legged miracle who had accomplished what months of therapy and gentle questioning couldn't. He'd given a traumatized little girl her voice back. And in doing so, he changed everything. The chaos that erupted in Courtroom 3B after Emma's testimony was unlike anything the veteran courthouse staff had ever witnessed. Judge Harper's gavel cracked again and again, the sound echoing off the walls, but it was barely audible over the cacophony of voices, crying and shouting that had transformed the dignified legal proceeding into pure pandemonium. "Order! I will have order in this court," Judge Harper bellowed, his face flushed red with the effort of trying to regain control. "Everyone sit down and be quiet, or I will clear this entire courtroom." But the commotion continued. In the gallery, family members on both sides were on their feet, some shouting support for Jennifer, others screaming that Emma had been manipulated, that this was all a setup orchestrated by a vindictive ex-wife. Emma's maternal grandmother was sobbing uncontrollably, being comforted by a cousin. David's brother was demanding to see his sibling, insisting this was a miscarriage of justice. The bailiffs had successfully removed David Carter from the courtroom, but his shouted denials could still be heard echoing down the courthouse hallway, growing fainter but no less desperate. "I didn't do anything. She's lying. My own daughter is lying about me. Jennifer coached her. This is all Jennifer's doing." At the witness stand, Emma remained wrapped around Max like a barnacle clinging to a rock in a storm. The German Shepherd hadn't moved an inch, despite the chaos swirling around them. His training had prepared him for emotional situations, but this was testing every bit of his discipline. Officer Chen stood nearby, one hand resting on Max's flank, both as a comfort to the dog and as a reminder to stay calm and steady. Emma's crying had quieted to hitching breaths and small whimpers, but she refused to let go of Max. Her fingers were tangled so deeply in his fur that Mrs. Patterson was worried about trying to separate them. The little girl had finally released her terrible secret, and now she seemed to be holding onto the only thing that made her feel safe in a world that had become terrifyingly loud and chaotic again. Dr. Rachel Kim remained crouched beside Emma, her hand hovering near the child's shoulder but not quite touching, giving her space. "Emma, you did it," Dr. Kim whispered, her own voice thick with emotion. "You told the truth. You were so brave. Nobody can hurt you now. You're safe." But Emma didn't respond. She just kept her face buried in Max's fur, her small body trembling with the aftershocks of having finally spoken the unspeakable. Jennifer Carter had completely broken down. She'd slid from her chair to the floor, her hands covering her face, her body racked with sobs that shook her entire frame. Monica Reeves and a victim advocate were trying to help her, but Jennifer was beyond consolation. "My baby," she kept repeating between gasps. "My poor baby. She's been carrying this for 6 months. 6 months. How could he threaten our daughter like that?" Detective Maria Santos had stepped out into the hallway, her phone pressed to her ear as she spoke rapidly with the district attorney's office. "Yes, I'm telling you," she gave a full eyewitness account. She described the assault in detail. David Carter struck Marcus Webb with a wine bottle, rendered him unconscious, and then threatened the child to keep her silent. "Yes, she's 3, but her testimony is credible. She's been completely nonverbal for 6 months because of his threats. We need an arrest warrant immediately. He's currently being held in the courthouse, but we need formal charges: assault with a deadly weapon, witness tampering, intimidation of a minor, and we need to find Marcus Webb." In the holding area down the hall, David Carter was being restrained by 4 bailiffs. His expensive suit was rumpled, his tie askew, and the veneer of successful businessman had completely shattered, revealing something desperate and dangerous beneath. "I want my lawyer," he screamed. "This is illegal. They can't do this to me. That child has been brainwashed. I'm her father. I have rights." Richard Blackwood arrived moments later, his face grim. As David's attorney, he'd seen the writing on the wall the moment Emma started talking. "David, stop talking. Don't say another word. Not one more word." But David couldn't stop. The panic had taken over completely. "She's wrong, Rick. Emma's confused. She's 3 years old. She doesn't understand what she saw. Maybe she had a nightmare and thinks it was real. Kids do that, right? They mix up dreams and reality. That's what happened. It has to be what happened." Blackwood stared at his client, and for the first time in his 20-year career defending difficult clients, he felt a wave of disgust. He'd suspected David might be guilty, but hearing the raw panic in the man's voice, the desperate scrambling to explain away a 3-year-old's testimony, made it real. "I said stop talking, David. The police are coming. You're going to be arrested. Anything you say can and will be used against you." Back in the courtroom, Judge Harper had finally managed to restore some semblance of order. The gallery had quieted to whispers and muffled crying, and people had returned to their seats. The judge looked exhausted, aged 10 years in the past 30 minutes. He removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes before speaking. "This court is going to take a 30-minute recess," Judge Harper announced, his voice hoarse from shouting. "When we return, we will address the custody matter. But let me be absolutely clear. What we just witnessed was a traumatized child finding the courage to tell a terrible truth. Emma Carter's testimony will be recorded, transcribed, and turned over to the district attorney's office for criminal prosecution. Mrs. Patterson, please take Emma to a quiet room. Dr. Kim, please accompany them. Officer Chen, your dog performed admirably. He may stay with Emma as long as she needs him." Chen nodded, grateful that Max would be allowed to continue providing comfort. The German shepherd seemed to sense that his job wasn't finished yet. "As for Mr. David Carter," Judge Harper continued, his voice hardening, "he is hereby ordered to have no contact with Emma Carter or Jennifer Carter pending criminal charges. This court will reconvene in 30 minutes to determine emergency custody arrangements. The gavel fell with finality, and the courtroom began to empty. Mrs. Patterson and Dr. Kim carefully guided Emma, still clinging to Max, down from the witness stand and toward a private room. The little girl's legs were shaky, barely supporting her weight, and she stumbled several times. Each time, Max adjusted his position slightly, allowing her to lean on him, literally supporting her as they walked. Officer Chen followed behind them, his heart heavy with the weight of what Emma had just revealed. He'd known the case was serious, but hearing the details from a 3-year-old's perspective, the terror in her halting words, the 6 months of silence caused by her father's threats, made him want to punch something, or someone. Specifically, David Carter. They reached a small conference room that the court had designated as a safe space. It had comfortable chairs, soft lighting, and toys in one corner, designed specifically for child witnesses who needed a break from the intensity of testimony. Mrs. Patterson settled into a chair and gently tried to encourage Emma to sit beside her, but Emma refused to release Max. "It's okay," Dr. Kim said softly. "Let her stay with him. She needs that connection right now." So Emma sat on the floor, her arms still wrapped around Max's neck, her face pressed against his fur. The German shepherd lay down carefully, making himself more accessible to her, and remained perfectly still except for the gentle rise and fall of his breathing. "Emma," Dr. Kim said after a few minutes of silence, kneeling down beside the child, "you were so incredibly brave today. Do you know that? You told the truth about something very scary, and that took more courage than most adults will ever have to show. Your mommy is so proud of you. I'm proud of you. And I think Max is proud of you too." At the mention of Max's name, Emma's grip loosened slightly. She turned her head just enough to look at Dr. Kim with red, swollen eyes. Is Mommy okay?" Her voice was so small, so fragile. "Daddy said. He said something bad would happen to Mommy if I told." Dr. Kim's heart broke at the fear still evident in Emma's voice. "Your mommy is completely safe, sweetheart. Your daddy can't hurt her. He can't hurt anyone anymore. The police are going to make sure of that. You telling the truth is what keeps your mommy safe. Do you understand?" Emma processed this slowly, her 3-year-old mind trying to grasp adult concepts of safety and justice. "I don't have to be quiet anymore." "No, honey, you never have to be quiet about this again. You can talk about it as much or as little as you want. And nobody is going to punish you for telling the truth." For the first time in 6 months, something that looked almost like relief crossed Emma's face. It was tentative, fragile, but it was there. Her death grip on Max loosened a bit more, though she kept one hand buried in his fur, as if he were her anchor to this new reality where speaking the truth didn't result in punishment. Officer Chen pulled out his phone and sent a quick text to his wife. The little girl spoke. Max helped her testify. She's been silent for 6 months because her father threatened her. I can't give details, but I'm going to hug Maya extra tight when I get home tonight. His wife's response came immediately. That's what heroes do. Both of you come home when you can. We'll be waiting. Chen looked down at Max, who was still dutifully allowing Emma to cling to him, and felt a surge of pride in his partner. This was what they'd trained for, not the dramatic arrests or the drug busts that made the news, but these quiet moments of providing safety to someone who desperately needed it. Detective Maria Santos appeared in the doorway, her phone finally put away. She knocked gently before entering. "Emma, honey, it's Detective Santos. We met before, remember?" Emma looked up, recognition flickering in her eyes. She nodded slightly. "I want you to know that we found Marcus," Maria said gently, choosing her words carefully. "He's alive. He's been in a hospital in Arizona, but he couldn't remember what happened to him. But now, because you were so brave and told us the truth, we know. We can help him now. You helped save him, Emma. You're a hero." Emma's eyes widened. "Marcus is okay." "He's going to be okay," Maria confirmed. It'll take time, but he's going to recover, and it's because of you. Emma absorbed this information slowly, and then something miraculous happened. For the first time in 6 months, Emma Carter smiled. It was small, uncertain, and lasted only a moment, but it was real. 6 weeks after that dramatic day in Courtroom 3B, Emma Carter sat cross-legged on a therapy room floor, building a tower of blocks while Officer Max lay beside her, his patient brown eyes watching every move she made. The tower wobbled precariously, and when it finally toppled, Emma giggled, a sound that still brought tears to everyone who heard it because for so long, they'd feared they might never hear her laugh again. "Good try," Dr. Rachel Kim encouraged from her chair nearby. "Want to build another one?" "Max wants to build one," Emma announced, her voice stronger now, more confident. She placed a block in front of the German Shepherd's nose. "Max, you help me." Max, of course, couldn't actually build a block tower, but he played his part perfectly, gently nosing the block closer to Emma, his tail wagging softly. Emma clapped her hands with delight, and Dr. Kim made a note on her tablet. "Patient continues to show remarkable progress. Speech is age-appropriate. Nightmares have decreased from nightly to 2-3 times per week. Strong attachment to therapy dog remains beneficial." The 6 weeks since Emma's testimony had been a whirlwind of legal proceedings, media attention, and slow but steady healing. David Carter had been arrested within hours of Emma's courtroom revelation, charged with assault with a deadly weapon, witness intimidation, threatening a minor, and obstruction of justice. His bail had been set at $500,000, which he'd managed to post, but he was under strict orders to stay away from both Emma and Jennifer. His attorney, Richard Blackwood, had tried to argue that Emma's testimony should be inadmissible due to her age and the irregular circumstances of a therapy dog being present, but Judge Harper had shut that argument down immediately. "That child was silent for 6 months because your client terrorized her into silence," the judge had said coldly. "The dog didn't coach her or manipulate her. He simply provided her with enough sense of safety to tell the truth. Her testimony stands." The prosecution's case had grown stronger when Marcus Webb's memories began returning. It started with fragments, flashes of David's angry face, the sensation of being hit, the taste of blood. Within 3 weeks, large portions of that night had come back to him. He remembered the argument, remembered David's jealous rage, remembered the wine bottle swinging toward his head. What he didn't remember was how he'd ended up in Arizona, and doctors suspected he never would. That journey remained lost in the fog of his traumatic brain injury. But Marcus's partial memories, combined with Emma's detailed testimony, the physical evidence from Jennifer's apartment, and the threatening statements David had made to Emma, created an overwhelming case. The district attorney, a sharp woman named Catherine Pierce, was confident they'd secure a conviction. David Carter thought he could silence a 3-year-old permanently, Catherine had told reporters on the courthouse steps. He thought he could intimidate a child into protecting him, but he underestimated that little girl's courage, and he certainly didn't account for a very special German shepherd named Max. The media had indeed discovered Max's role in Emma's breakthrough, and the story had gone viral. News outlets across the country covered it. Police dog helps silent child testify. Therapy dog breaks through trauma. K9 officer becomes courtroom hero. Officer Chen's phone had been ringing non-stop with interview requests, which he'd politely declined. This wasn't about publicity, it was about helping a child heal. What Chen had accepted, however, was a commendation from the police chief and a request to develop a formal therapy dog program for the department. "What Max did in that courtroom proves we need more dogs like him," Chief Raymond Martinez had declared. "We need animals who can help traumatized witnesses, especially children, find their voices. Officer Chen, I'm authorizing you to create and lead this program." Chen had been honored but insisted that Max deserved most of the credit. "I just hold the leash," he'd said modestly. "Max is the one who understands what these victims need." The custody hearing had reconvened the day after Emma's testimony, but it had been brief and uncontested. With David facing serious criminal charges and having demonstrably traumatized his daughter, Judge Harper awarded full custody to Jennifer, with supervised visitation for David only if he was acquitted, which seemed increasingly unlikely. Jennifer had wept with relief and gratitude, holding Emma close and whispering promises that she'd never let anyone hurt her baby again. The most remarkable part of Emma's recovery, however, was the role Max continued to play. After that first day, Dr. Kim had recommended regular therapy sessions with Max present, and Judge Harper had authorized it as part of Emma's court-mandated psychological care. Twice a week, Officer Chen brought Max to the Children's Trauma Center, and Emma spent an hour in therapy with the dog by her side. The change in Emma was nothing short of miraculous. With Max present, she talked freely about that night, about her fears, about the nightmares. She drew pictures of what she'd seen, acted out scenarios with dolls, and slowly processed the trauma that had been poisoning her from the inside. Without Max, she still struggled sometimes, especially around adult men she didn't know, but she no longer retreated into total silence. She'd learned that her voice mattered, that telling the truth was safe, and that she didn't have to carry terrible secrets alone. "Max is my best friend," Emma had told her mother one evening. "He helped me be brave." Jennifer had smiled through her tears and said, "He helped all of us be brave, sweetheart." Now, in this therapy session 6 weeks later, Emma was practicing something new, talking about the future instead of the past. "Dr. Kim," Emma said, carefully placing another block on her tower, "when I'm bigger, can I have a dog like Max?" Dr. Kim smiled. "I think that would be wonderful. Would you take good care of a dog?" "The best care," Emma said seriously. "I would feed him and pet him and tell him he's a good boy every day. And if someone was scared and sad like I was, my dog could help them too." "That's a beautiful idea, Emma." Emma looked at Max, who gazed back at her with those calm, understanding eyes. "Max," she said, "do you think I'll be okay?" The dog's tail wagged, and he shifted closer to her, resting his head on her small lap. Emma wrapped her arms around his neck, not with the desperate, drowning grip of that first day in court, but with simple affection and trust. "I think Max believes you're going to be just fine," Dr. Kim said softly. Officer Chen, watching from his usual spot near the door, felt his eyes sting with emotion. He'd witnessed Max help dozens of victims over the years, but Emma's transformation was particularly powerful. This little girl had gone from completely silent and traumatized to laughing, playing, and talking about getting her own dog someday. That was the definition of healing. After the session ended and Emma had been picked up by her mother, Dr. Kim approached Chen with a proposal. "I've been thinking," she said. "Emma's case got a lot of attention, but there are hundreds of traumatized children out there who could benefit from therapy dog assistance. Would you and Max be interested in working with me on a pilot program?" Chen didn't hesitate. "Absolutely. That's exactly what we want to do." "Excellent. I'll draft a proposal for the court system and the police department. With Emma's success story as evidence, I think we can get funding and support." 3 months after Emma's testimony, David Carter's trial began. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. Emma's testimony via videotape. The judge ruled she didn't have to testify in person again. Marcus's recovered memories, forensic evidence from Jennifer's apartment, and testimony from multiple experts about Emma's trauma and David's intimidation tactics. The defense tried to argue that Emma had been confused, that her memories were unreliable, that Marcus's brain injury made his testimony questionable. But the jury didn't buy it. After just 4 hours of deliberation, they returned with a verdict: guilty on all counts. David Carter was sentenced to 12 years in prison. As he was led away in handcuffs, he looked broken and diminished, nothing like the successful businessman who'd walked into that custody hearing months earlier. Jennifer attended the sentencing with Emma, though they sat in a separate room where Emma couldn't see her father. When the verdict was read, Jennifer broke down crying, but this time they were tears of relief. "It's over," she whispered to her daughter. "It's finally over." "Mommy," Emma said, patting her mother's hand with the wisdom of a child who'd been forced to grow up too fast. "It's okay. Max helped me be brave. And now the bad thing is done and we can be happy again." 6 months after that day in court, Emma started preschool. She was nervous the first day, clutching Mr. Hopper's and asking repeatedly if Max could come with her. He couldn't, of course, but Officer Chen arranged for Max to visit Emma's school once a month as part of a new Therapy Dogs in Schools program he developed. When Max arrived for his first school visit, Emma ran to him with squeals of delight, throwing her arms around his neck. "Max, you came. I knew you'd come." The other children gathered around, fascinated by the gentle German shepherd who allowed them all to pet him. Emma stood beside Max with obvious pride, telling her classmates, "This is Max. He's a police dog, but he's also the nicest dog in the whole world. He helped me when I was sad." The teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, watched with misty eyes as Emma, the little girl whose file had warned about selective mutism and severe trauma, confidently introduced Max to her peers. This was what healing looked like. A year after Emma first spoke those 2 words in Courtroom 3B, Officer Chen received a letter from her. It was written in crayon, with backwards letters and creative spelling, but the message was clear. "Dear Max, thank you for helping me be brave. I talk all the time now. Mommy says I talk too much. I am happy now. You are the best dog. I love you. Love, Emma." Attached to the letter was a drawing of a little girl with blonde hair standing next to a large German shepherd. Both were smiling. Above the drawing in Jennifer's handwriting was a note. "Max gave my daughter her voice back. How do you thank someone for a miracle? We'll never be able to repay you, Officer Chen, but please know that Emma thinks of Max every day. He didn't just help her testify, he taught her that she was worth saving. That's a gift beyond measure." Chen pinned the drawing to the bulletin board in his office, where it remained for years, a reminder of why he and Max did this work. Because sometimes, justice doesn't come from lawyers or judges or police investigations. Sometimes it comes from a 3-year-old girl who finds the courage to say 2 simple words to a dog who offers nothing but unconditional safety. "Come here." And sometimes those 2 words change everything. Officer Max continued his therapy work for another 4 years before retiring at age 9. During his career, he helped 93 traumatized witnesses find their voices. But if you asked Officer Chen which case mattered most, he'd always point to that drawing on his wall. A little girl and her dog, both smiling, both heroes in their own right. Emma Carter grew up to become a child psychologist, specializing in trauma therapy. And true to her word from that day in Dr. Kim's office, she got a dog of her own, a German shepherd she named Maxwell, in honor of the dog who saved her life by simply being there when she needed him most. Some voices are silenced by fear, but some voices are restored by love, patience, and a 4-legged friend who proves that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is ask for help, even if it's just 2 words. "Come here."